The smell of oak still lingered in my grandfather's house 3 months after we buried him. I stood in his living room, running my fingers along the bookshelf he had built with his own hands, thinking how lucky I was to have a wife who would support me through this grief. Diana had been my rock for 6 years, or so I thought, because the first words out of her mouth when she learned about my inheritance were not comfort. They were a question that froze me cold. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, and if you have ever trusted someone who turned out to have hidden motives, hit that like button right now. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Stick around, because what she said next and what I did about it might just change how you think about trust in marriage. Let me take you back to where it all began. My grandfather Walter was not a rich man in the traditional sense. He was a carpenter, a craftsman. He built his house on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon with nothing but his own 2 hands, a truck full of lumber, and a stubbornness that could outlast any Oregon winter. I grew up in that house. My parents divorced when I was 8 years old, and my mother, struggling to keep herself together, sent me to live with Grandpa Walter. It was supposed to be temporary. It became permanent. And honestly, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Grandpa Walter taught me everything: how to measure twice and cut once, how to sand wood until it felt like silk under your fingers, how to look a man in the eye when you shake his hand. But more than anything, he taught me about character. I remember one summer when I was 12 years old. We spent 3 weeks building a chair together, just a simple wooden chair, but he made me do it right. Every joint had to be perfect. Every angle had to be precise. When I got frustrated and wanted to rush through it, he sat me down and said something I have never forgotten. He said, "Abel, a man's word is his bond, son, but watch how others keep theirs before you trust them with yours." I still have that chair. It sits in my apartment to this day, or at least it did. Over 50 years, Grandpa Walter turned his carpentry skills into something more. He bought properties when they were cheap. He fixed them up with his own hands. He rented them out. He invested wisely. By the time he passed, he had accumulated a small fortune. Not because he was greedy, but because he was patient. Because he understood that real wealth is built slowly, with intention, with care. I met Diana 7 years ago at a charity event downtown. She was volunteering at a silent auction, and I remember being struck by how different she seemed from the other women I had dated. She did not ask about my job within the first 5 minutes. She did not care what kind of car I drove. She laughed easily and seemed genuinely interested in the cause we were supporting. We talked for 3 hours that night. By the end of it, I knew I wanted to see her again. We dated for 14 months before I proposed. I took her back to the little Italian restaurant where we had our first real date. Nothing fancy. Just good food and a nervous guy with a ring in his pocket. She said yes before I even finished asking the question. We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony. Grandpa Walter walked me down the aisle. It was one of the happiest days of my life. For 6 years, I thought we had a good marriage. Diana handled our finances. She was organized, methodical. I trusted her completely. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way she would casually ask about Grandpa Walter's health. The questions about his properties that seemed innocent at the time. The way her eyes would light up whenever I mentioned visiting him. I thought she was just being supportive. I thought she cared about my family. I was wrong. Grandpa Walter passed away on a Tuesday morning in October. Heart attack. He went quickly, peacefully in the house he built with his own hands. He was 78 years old. I delivered the eulogy at his funeral, and I could not keep my voice from breaking. This man had raised me. He had shaped me into whoever I am today, and now he was gone. Diana stood beside me at the service, but something felt off. She seemed distracted, distant. I told myself she just did not know how to handle grief. Some people are like that. They pull away when things get heavy. I made excuses for her. 2 weeks after the funeral, we gathered at the lawyer's office for the reading of the will. I was not expecting much. Grandpa Walter had other grandchildren, cousins I saw at holidays. I figured he had divided everything up fairly. But when the lawyer finished reading, I realized Grandpa Walter had left everything to me. The house valued at around $850,000. The investment accounts and cash totaling about $1.5 million. Everything. The lawyer explained that Grandpa Walter had already given money to my cousins over the years, helping them with college, with down payments, with various needs. I was the only one who had stayed close, the only one who visited every Sunday, the only one who actually knew him. I sat there in shock trying to process what this meant. But what I remember most from that moment was Diana. She sat perfectly still throughout the entire reading. And when the lawyer announced the total value of the estate, I saw her eyes change. They got brighter, sharper. It was subtle, but I noticed it, and something in my stomach turned. That night we drove back to our rented apartment in silence. I was still processing my grief, still trying to understand that Grandpa Walter was really gone. I sat down in the living room with an old photograph of him in my hands, just staring at his face, remembering all the summers we spent together. Diana came up behind me and put her hand on my shoulder. For a moment I thought she was going to comfort me. I thought she was going to say something kind about my grandfather, something about how much he meant to me. Instead, she said this: "So when do we get access to the accounts? I have been looking at some properties downtown. This could really change things for us." I did not move. I could not. My grandfather had been dead for 3 months. We had just listened to his final wishes being read aloud a few hours ago, and the first thing my wife wanted to talk about was access to accounts and real estate investments. I turned to look at her. "What do you mean, change things?" She smiled like it was obvious. "Well, we have been renting for 6 years. Do you not think it is time we bought something substantial, something that reflects where we are headed?" I felt something crack inside me. Not break, not yet, but crack. Like the first fracture in a piece of wood before it splits. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe she was just being practical. Maybe she was trying to help me look forward instead of backward. I made excuses for her again. But that night, lying in bed next to her, I could not shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us. The weeks that followed only made things worse. Diana became obsessed with the inheritance in a way that made my skin crawl. During the first week, she started sending me links to real estate listings, not starter homes, not reasonable investments, penthouses in the Pearl District. Properties listed at over $1 million. When I told her I needed time to process everything, that I was not ready to make any big decisions, she actually seemed annoyed. "I understand," she said, "but the market will not wait. We need to act fast." We, like the money was already ours. The second week, she brought up the accounts directly. She suggested I add her name to the inheritance accounts. "Just for convenience," she said, "so I can help manage everything." When I hesitated, her tone shifted. She accused me of not trusting her. She said that after 6 years of marriage, she deserved to be treated as an equal partner. I tried to explain that this was different. This was my grandfather's legacy. This was personal. She did not want to hear it. By the third week, Diana had scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor without even asking me. She just put it on my calendar like it was already decided. During the meeting, she talked about our investment strategy, our 5-year plan, our property portfolio. She spoke as if the money had already been deposited into a joint account with both our names on it. The advisor looked at me for confirmation, and I just sat there too stunned to contradict her in front of a stranger. After the meeting in the car, I finally spoke up. I told Diana that I wanted to keep the inheritance separate. I explained that this was my grandfather's life, work, his legacy, and I felt a responsibility to honor that. I said I needed time to decide what to do with it, and I wanted to make those decisions on my own terms. She did not respond. Not a single word. We drove the rest of the way home, in complete silence. When we got inside, she went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. I stood in the kitchen alone, wondering how we had gotten here, wondering who I had actually married. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Aunt Patricia, Grandpa Walter's younger sister. She was the only person in my family who had ever expressed any reservations about Diana. At my wedding, she had pulled me aside and whispered, "Just be careful, honey." At the time, I thought she was just being an overprotective aunt. Now I wondered if she had seen something I had not. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" she asked. I told her I was managing. Then, without really planning to, I found myself telling her about Diana, about the property listings, about the financial advisor meeting, about the silence that had settled over our apartment like a fog. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Abel, your grandfather talked to me before he passed. He said he hoped you would protect what he built. He trusted you to know the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves what you have." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Grandpa Walter had seen it too. He had seen what I was only just beginning to understand, and even from beyond the grave he was trying to warn me. That night, I could not sleep. I kept replaying every conversation Diana and I had ever had, about money, about the future, about Grandpa Walter. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how many red flags I had ignored. The questions about his health that came just a little too often, the way she would suggest visiting him right around the time his quarterly investment statements arrived, the interest in his properties that I had mistaken for politeness. The final piece of the puzzle came a few days later. Diana had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she took a shower. I was not trying to snoop. I just glanced at it when a notification lit up the screen. It was a text from her brother, Tyler. It said, "So did he agree to put your name on the accounts yet?" My hands were shaking as I picked up the phone. I told myself I should not look, that it was a violation of privacy. But I had to know. I opened the message thread. Diana had replied, "Not yet. He is being difficult. But I will figure it out. 6 years I have waited for this. 6 years." The words burned into my brain. 6 years I have waited for this. Not 6 years of loving me. Not 6 years of building a life together. 6 years of waiting. Like I was a stock she had invested in and now it was finally time to cash out. I put the phone down exactly where I found it. When Diana came out of the shower, I acted like nothing had happened. But inside, something had died. The man who had made excuses for her, who had given her the benefit of the doubt, who had trusted her with his whole heart. That man was gone. I called Marcus the next day. Marcus and I had been friends since college. He had gone to law school while I went into software engineering. Now he specialized in estate planning, trusts, and asset protection. I told him everything. The texts, the ultimatums, the 6 years of waiting. Marcus listened without interrupting. Then he said, "Under Oregon law, inheritance is considered separate property. As long as you have not commingled it with marital assets, she does not have an automatic claim to it. But if you divorce, she might try to argue that she is entitled to a portion of any appreciation, or she might claim you made promises about sharing it. There are ways to protect yourself, Abel. If you want to." "I want to," I said, and I meant it. But before I could act, Diana made her move. It was a Friday night.